Mzansi, Africa, and the rest of the Simply Label podcast family from all over the world. Hey, tada! Welcome to another week of our growing podcast. I'm excited to have you on board. I've got some great news. But before I do that, before I share these great news, I want to salute three of my favorite places in all of South Africa. Abantu baseBhayi, abantu baseMonti, abantu baseKapa. Ni right kodwa? Di right nama, enkosi yakhonto. Someone listening right now and thinking, did I dial into the right podcast? Absolutely you have. Here at the Simply Label podcast family, we embrace our South African dialects and lingos and cultures and languages. And what I've just spoken is one of the popular languages in South Africa called isiXhosa. And the three places that I've just mentioned happen to be places that I've lived in. And I live currently in one of them, as you would know if you've been following this podcast for some time now. Now to the exciting news. I got an email earlier today, saying, in fact, I'm going to open it now as we chat about this. It is so exciting, guys. It really is a validation of the work we're putting in. But more importantly, it just humbled my heart to see that, we are being appreciated so much for this work that we are putting in. And this is what the email says. It says, one of those times where you're trying to find something and you struggle. Oh, there we go. It says, hello, how is it going? Hope all is well. I have some cool information that might interest you. Your podcast, the Simply Label podcast, has good performance in Apple Podcasts rankings in the last 30 days. Number one, it is in position 5 in the category of philosophy in South Africa. And position number 85, this is the second thing, in the category of society and culture in South Africa. This data is provided by podstatus.com. Happy podcasting. So, my Simply Label podcast family, I want to say thank you for your support. This would not be possible if you didn't click that button, if you didn't take interest in the work that we do, and it's so rewarding to see. More importantly, it's fulfilling to see that we are making a difference and being recognized for the difference we are making. So now on to today's topic. We are talking about a very exciting topic personally to me. I call it great culture. In fact, let me start that again. Great leadership, great culture, great performance. Or alternatively put, great leadership leads to great culture, which leads to great performance. Let me kick it off with something unique today. The other day, as I was doing research for this week's topic, and I came across a productivity survey done by Gallup. It's called the Gallup Report of 2017. I know it's a little bit far back, but I think the insights are still very much relevant. This survey in particular was covering the impact of employee engagement on productivity of a number of organizations that were surveyed, particularly in the US. 3 key findings that they came out with in this, particularly using, or rather that identified 3 variables. One is showing up and staying. Number 2 is customer outcomes. And number 3 is profit. And I'm going to unpack each one of them very quickly by way of some statistics that I think will build a good foundation for what we're about to talk about today. Let's talk about the showing up and staying. Here it says, engaged employees make it a point to show up to work and do more work. Highly engaged business units realize a 41% reduction in absenteeism and a 17% increase in productivity. Engaged workers also are more likely to stay with their employers. In high turnover organizations, highly engaged business units achieve 24% less turnover. In lower, or rather low turnover organizations, the gains are even more dramatic. Highly engaged business units achieve 59% less turnover. High turnover organizations are those with more than 40% annualized turnover, and low turnover organizations are those with 40% or lower annualized turnover. Right? Let me not kill you with numbers on this one. Let's move to the customer outcomes. Employees who are engaged consistently show up to work and have a greater commitment to quality and safety. Understandably, these employees also help their organizations improve customer relationships and obtain impressive organic growth. Highly engaged business units achieve a 10% increase in customer ratings and a 20% increase in sales. Sure. Let's move on to profit. Engaged employees are more present and productive. They are more attuned to the needs of customers, and they are more observant of processes, standards, and systems. When taken together, the behaviors of highly engaged business units result in 21% greater profitability. And it closes this by saying, creating the right culture is possible. So, friends, you might be thinking, what is the point of all of these numbers and statistics and this that you're quoting, Lebo? It is for the following reason. We're going to talk about, as I said, great leadership equals great culture equals great performance. And I found these insights quite glaring and very beneficial for what we're about to unpack a lot further. So, as we close on the Gallup survey, let's now get into defining what is actually culture. Simply put, culture are the ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. Let me repeat that. The ideas, customs, and social behavior of a particular people or society. So, if that is the definition for culture, how do we then, what is the context? How does it change in the context of an organization or company? So in other words, what do we mean then by organizational culture? There's a couple of definitions, but I'll just highlight two of them. One of them says, organizational culture is generally understood as all of a company's beliefs, values, and attitudes, and how these influence the behavior of its employees. Culture affects how people experience an organization. That is, what it's like for a customer to buy from a company or a supplier to work with a company. Let me read you an alternative definition. Organizational culture is the shared beliefs, attitudes, and expectations within the company. It's dependent on both the employers and employees and affects the day-to-day operations. Companies with a successful organizational cultures have higher employee engagement rates and, as a result, better productivity. I'd like to repeat that last one because it's very, very important for our episode today. Companies with successful organizational cultures have higher employee engagement rates and, as a result, better productivity. That is a mouthful. So, in short, friends, I've had the opportunity to work for 4 organizations, or in total 5, but 4 if I look at the number of years that I've spent in these particular organizations. And each of them, I found, in my experience, have had a different culture, a different way of doing things, a different set of beliefs, a different way of speaking, a different way of measuring, performance, one from another, different nuances, just a way people relate to each other, the way they give each other feedback or not give each other feedback. All of these really culminate to a culture of an organization. And you might think, why is this so important? I want to try and illustrate it by pointing out two things for you. I'm going to share some insights from one of my favorite authors and leadership gurus of all time, John C. Maxwell. And then I'm going to close our podcast today by sharing a concept and a model that we have come up with as the Simply Label team that we think is going to be beneficial if you are a new leader, even an existing leader already or manager in your environment, that I believe you're going to benefit quite a bit from today's episode. Let's start with how John C. Maxwell, views this thing called culture or organizational culture. So having listened to one of his podcasts recently, he talks about the three components of cultivating culture. And I want to say this as I open this, that a culture of an organization can either make or break an organization. So I'll be toggling between the good and the bad of the culture, and I would hope that as a Simply Label family member by now, you would have had the chance to listen to previous episodes, especially the series that we did on the multiplier leader, and in there we were very explicit in what a great leader looks like, which we call a multiplier, and what a not so great leader looks like, which we called a diminisher, as per the insights from Liz Wiseman. But today we're really going to focus on the culture that leadership can produce or sometimes produces, that can either advance or detract an organization, that can either create a great working atmosphere, which leads to great productivity, or can do quite the opposite, can lead to a toxic atmosphere, which leads to stagnation and potentially, people leaving the organization. So back to John C. Maxwell, he talks about the three components of cultivating culture. And three of them are behavior, symbols, and systems. Behavior, symbols, or systems. Let's talk about behavior. What does he mean by this? And as I listened and I took out my own insights, I realized that culture has to express itself, right, outwardly. It is an inward posture of that expresses itself outwardly, right? So you will see it in the behavior of the people in an organization. Right. So, and mostly it's because culture and behavior is role modeled, that people will often either behave as their leader or they will pattern their behavior according to what is permissible within their team or within their organization. Right. And that is why John Maxwell makes a point to say, it's not what you say as a leader that determines the culture, it's what you do. Right? Because people will take you seriously based on what it is or will take what you do more seriously than what it is that you say. So he uses an example where he used to run a church, right? And in this church, it was growing exponentially. And as you know, typically a church would meet on Sundays, and the meetings grew bigger and bigger, so much so that he had to do, 3-4 services on a Sunday. And then he realized, man, I'm running out of parking space in this particular premises that we are currently using. He then managed to secure premises about 3-4 blocks away from the current premises, and the idea about that was to obviously alleviate parking space where he is, and begin to divert some of the traffic that way, but also to lead by example, in that he wanted to encourage his long-term members to rather park a little bit further away, so that they make the new ones that are coming in a lot more comfortable, and they can park conveniently, to the current premises. So he decided on one occasion, the best way I'm going to do this is I must come in early, park there myself, walk all the way to the current premises, and then engage my team, and encourage them to do similarly. The point here is him doing it, as opposed to him saying it, gave his idea more credibility, such that it was easier then to sell the idea to people of his current organization. Does that make sense? So it is what he did more than what he said that gave the idea more credibility. Let's talk about the symbols. What are some of the symbols that are being embraced in your organization currently? Is rank a big thing? Someone only talks to you when you have a bigger title, or they only respond to you when they see that, hey, this is the managing executive, or this is the director of this and that, and this is the head of this and that. But if you are a colleague like them, similar rank in inverted commas, that they kind of drag their feet because they respect the title more than they do the actual the person that they work next to. If that is the case, that is very unfortunate, because then it fuels an unfortunate culture within an organization. Things like who gets the office, or who gets the big office, who gets the corner office. What comes to mind in this particular one is I once worked for an organization. I took over a team which had been led by one of my very, very, very best of friends, and it so happened to be the team that I took over when he left. And I got a chance, to witness how he, while he was there, moved away from his office, having seen that, there is a need for more office space to be able to assist customers as they come in. Instead of customers having to wait and colleagues having to, take turns and explain and apologize to customers, he moved away from his office, completely relinquished it, and said, team, you use the office. I'll sit here in the open plan area where I can be with all of you. Something so simple, yet so profound. It literally changed the atmosphere and the culture in the office. It became more open. People realized, we have a leader that is accessible. And when I came in, I decided, why change a good thing? Why change something that is working? I continued in the same vein, not having any office, sitting there with my little desk. Not that I needed an office to hog. We will book an office if we need to. We'll have an engagement with one-on-ones with teams or colleagues if we need to. But for the rest of the day, why sit in an office? Right? So, these are just some of the things, guys, that I just wanted to share, hoping that they would spark a conversation within the Simply Level podcast family. People aren't impressed with you because you get a good office. They are impressed with you because you add value to them. When they can trust you, and also when they know that you care about them. And that is a quote from John C. Maxwell. Number 3, the systems. What gets measured? How do we pay, employees in the organization? What gets reported on? What does the budgeting look like, and how is it done? What is the structure of the organization? All of these things implicitly, they may be intangible in nature, but the impact is definitely felt. So organizations need to be really, really careful around how do we measure performance, how do we pay colleagues, all of these things all add up to an atmosphere, a culture, a way of thinking, and a way of living within any organization. So let me point to colleagues. If we had enough time, friends, if we had enough time, I would point you to or unpack a video clip that is one of my favorites by a professor called Professor Sumantra Ghoshal. He talks about the smell of the place. That is the title of the video clip. You can find it on YouTube. The smell of the place. And he makes some strong assertions and findings, really, because this was an actual research that they undertook. And he came up with, or rather, the research showed 4 things that are common to organizations with a poor work culture. And these 4 things are constraint, compliance, control, and contract. I wish we had enough time to unpack them. So instead of creating such an environment, he then proposes that instead of constraint, a leader must create an environment of stretch, right? Where colleagues are constantly stretched, create a culture of continuous learning, create a culture of people are allowed to make mistakes, and as long as they learn from them and they do better next time. Does it make sense? Now, secondly, instead of creating a culture of compliance, rather create a culture of self-discipline, where colleagues are entrusted with responsibility, so that should they make a mistake, and more often than not, they will. We all make mistakes. The important thing here is that colleagues must learn from those, and lift themselves up and continue. And it should be actually the environment which disciplines an individual. When they self-discipline, then there is no need to actually physically discipline colleagues. Does it make sense? Number 3, instead of creating control, create an environment of support where colleagues know that they are supported, where they know that support is not just something that is spoken about. It is real. It is something that is tangible. One of my favorite things to do is actually to go out and see customers with my colleagues, my frontline colleagues who are in direct contact with customers. I don't find pleasure in sitting in an office. I don't understand why some managers and leaders do that. It's not effective. But people really need to feel supported. Lastly, instead of creating an environment of contract, rather create an environment of trust, right? Because trust is the currency of all healthy relationship. You can talk about marriage, you can talk about friendship, you can talk about a work environment. In the absence of trust, there cannot be a healthy working relationship, and therefore there cannot be a healthy work culture. Now, it leads me to my last part of this episode, friends, the principle that I would like to introduce to you that we have titled COINS, COINS, COINS. Sounds interesting, right? What do we mean by this? So we realized that we need to simplify, how a leader can come in and change an environment. If they are a new leader coming into environment, or even if they are an existing leader that have been leading a team for a while, there are a couple of basic but very important things that if done sincerely and consistently, it can change a work culture from a poor one to a healthy one, and therefore one that is progressive and productive. COINS, what do we mean? The C stands for connect. Make an effort, if you are a leader or a manager, to connect with each and every one of your colleagues that report directly to you. Make an effort. Take them out to change the venue. Don't meet them in a place where they experience conflict, where they experience stress, in the familiar surroundings of where it is that they are working. Change the venue, change of scenery, take them to coffee, make an effort, learn about them as an individual, learn about their family background, learn about what drives them, what is it about them that brings them to work, what are they working for, what are their goals, learn about them. Because when you do that, colleagues will get a sense that this manager and this leader of mine is interested in me as a person before they're actually interested in what it is that is my output. Does it make sense? The O stands for observe. I like to use in this particular part the analogy of a coach, whether be it a soccer coach or rugby coach. The coach does not send out the team to go and play and then wait for them in the waiting or in the changing room and then says how did it go. No, the coach is always on the touch line, and I like that word. We need to get back to the touch line as leaders, where we observe our players and our teams in action individually, where we get to see them at their best, and sometimes at their best, and sometimes maybe at their worst. And sometimes maybe they're having an off day. We need to be there, provide motivation on the spot, provide inspiration, provide, correction, as it were. But come what may, make an effort to observe, be intentional, be on the field, be on the touchline. The I stands for ignite and inspire. You see, once you've connected and observed, you are likely to have enough information about individual team members that are in your team to be able to know how to ignite or to inspire them, and to tailor that ignition and inspiration to each and every one of them, right? We need to get to a stage as leaders where every day you wake up with an intention to say, who am I going to inspire and ignite today, and how am I going to do it? And when you go to sleep, who did I ignite and who did I inspire? Does it make sense? The N stands for nurture. This is basically continuous coaching based on the unique talents that you've that you have identified within each and every one of your team members, right? Coaching works best at an individual level. Yes, you can have, these nice motivational sessions as teams, but coaching is personal. Coaching is tailor-made to every individual that is in your team. So as a leader, you got to make it your obsession to coach every individual in your team without any exception. If you want to get the best out of them, the only way to do it and the best way to do it is have a tailor-made coaching plan for every single one of your team members and follow through with it. That is what we call nurturing. Lastly, stretch. That is the S now. Stretch. Wow. You see, once you've done all of the above, what now needs to happen is continuous growth, stretching. If you give one person a stretch, task, it doesn't mean that the next person can be given the same one. In other words, what you give one person will differ from what you give the other. Why? Because the coaching is tailor-made, right? And the growth journeys and the ambitions of these individuals in your team are different. So you've got to be very intentional and very, very laser sharp in knowing at which stage is this particular member in terms of their learning curve versus the other team member. And make sure that you follow through on that. Continue to stretch. Why? Because with continuous learning, you continue to, the individual will benefit, but definitely the organization will itself also continue to benefit. Now, friends, that is the COINS principle. I strongly believe that with consistent practice of these principles, you will not only create a healthy culture, but also a progressive and sustainable culture of high performance within your team. Well, friends, this marks the end of this week's episode. I look forward to your comments and suggestions as to what you would like to be covered on this leadership segment in future. Please continue to hit the follow and notification button so that you don't miss any future episodes. Also, please rate our podcast on Spotify and continue to share our podcast link with others so that we can continue to grow a new breed of leaders across the world. Thank you for your support as we bow out in the only way we know how is the Simply Label family. Tada!